Let's talk about the statement by House of Commons Speaker John Bercow that's causing a bit of a stir, to say the least. Mr Bercow was asked about a parliamentary motion which has so far been signed by 189 opposition MPs, deploring, it says, the actions of US President Donald Trump and asking that he be barred from addressing Parliament when he makes his state visit to the UK later this year. Government sources quoted in this morning's papers say the White House has given no indication that Mr Trump wants to address Parliament. But Mr Bercow has made it clear that isn't going to happen.
We value our relationship with the United States. If a state visit takes place, that is way beyond and above the pay grade of the Speaker. However, as far as this place is concerned, I feel very strongly that our opposition to racism and to sexism and our support for equality before the law and an independent judiciary are hugely important considerations in the House of Commons.
John Bercow finishing with a hard stare at the Tory benches, where, of course, he once sat. Well, I'm joined now by the Conservative MP Alex Shelbrooke and by the co-leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, giving you a warm smile to welcome you onto the programme. Caroline Lucas, were you one of the people applauding the Speaker's ban on Donald Trump?
I was applauding him. I think it's quite right that he challenges the idea that Parliament is there for the Prime Minister to pimp out to whoever she wants to. Being able to speak in Westminster Hall is a real privilege. It isn't accorded to many people. We've got the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, we've got the first black president, they've spoken there. But really the idea of offering this visit so prematurely and potentially the opportunity to speak in the hall, that's not been clarified, but potentially, I think absolutely sends out all the wrong signs.
Right, so Theresa May is literally pimping out Parliament in terms of this state visit and the offer of Donald Trump addressing Parliament. Is that how you see it?
No, not at all. And let me say right at the start, I don't support some of the policies of Donald Trump, and I certainly feel that his attitude and some of the things being recorded to women are unacceptable. There are many world leaders who I find their politics to be unacceptable. As I understand it, an invitation hasn't even been requested to speak in Westminster Hall. So it's a bit of a hypothetical argument, and it's one which I think perhaps at this stage was slightly unnecessary. But what I don't quite understand is that the Speaker said it was an honour to introduce the Emir of Kuwait, a country that jails people for 7 years for being gay, a country that represses women, a country that bans Israelis from entering. Now, I would have thought that the comments of I'm against racism, I'm against sexism would fit that as well. So I wonder why there isn't a consistency to the policies.
And isn't that the point? It's hypocritical. I mean, as Alex Shelbrooke has just said, there have been examples where John Bercow has been very happy to roll out the red carpet. First of all, to the Chinese President, Xi Jinping, and also the Indonesian President, Joko Widodo. And we'll have a listen to that in a moment. They're not exactly known for not being oppressive or for their human rights freedoms, are they?
They're certainly not. And I'm not here as an apologist for John Bercow's previous decisions. What I'm talking about is the decision that he made yesterday. With the President of China, apparently he did raise human rights concerns. I don't know if that's true. But we're talking about a particular honour of Westminster Hall, which has with it all of the symbolism, all of the trappings of a state visit. And it's simply not appropriate. It's not just Parliament saying that. There are huge numbers of people out in the country who think that too.
Right, but John Bercow did do exactly that. He did bestow the honour on the two leaders I have just mentioned. Let's have a look.
Your visit here today, Mr President, reinforces the links between the United Kingdom and China. Those links are social and personal, as well as economic and political, and are all the stronger for that. This trip should provide the means for both sides to come to understand one another better.
You are in many ways the personification, and the very, very, very welcome personification at that, of a changing country in changing times. We are very pleased indeed that you are with us here today, a fact that I hope the nature and enthusiasm of your gathering make very clear.
So how is it justifiable to deny the democratically elected leader of our closest ally the same sort of honour, Caroline Lucas?
Well, first of all, it's a detail, but that isn't the same location that we're talking about. Second of all, I don't want to actually, apologise for what John Bercow was doing there. I don't think the language that he used was particularly appropriate. But if you were to try to make an argument...
John Bercow is being two-faced in this, isn't he?
If you were trying to make an argument, I think what you would say is that with the Chinese, what he is trying to do is to make stronger links with a country that for many decades has been very repressive. With the US, what we're trying to do is to send a signal to our closest ally, as you say, who we have worked with on so many issues, from climate change through to trying to tackle the war on terror and so on and so forth. And so what we're trying to do there is send a very different signal.
Right.
But isn't this the point? That the reason we invite these people from very important nations and give them these chances to address the House is that we want to have influence. And I mean, we can all find things to criticise about Donald Trump, but the fact is that we have a very good relationship with the US. We need to maintain that relationship, and we need to have the influence on the things that matter. And I think there are a lot of areas where we would all want our country to be able to influence him and his country. And to be quite honest, given that that's exactly the position we've taken with China, I think Bercow is really grandstanding.
Well,
I think he should be taking
is he overstepping the mark in terms of his role? I mean, it does say that he should act with authority and with impartiality. Is this impartial?
No, it's not. And I think that this is actually the crux of the matter. What people's opinions of Donald Trump are almost a side issue. I mean, I will say this. I think at a time when Donald Trump is discussing building walls, etc., it's better to build bridges, and we're putting walls up around Westminster. But he has not acted impartially, and therefore it is difficult to command the respect, because the Speaker should not have got involved in this. And I want to remove the issue of Donald Trump and take this too. I do not understand why he did what he did just down the chair, and along with many other colleagues, they're very angry that he has undermined the chair.
He was asked a question by a Labour MP. He replied. He stood up, and in a way that many of us wish our own Prime Minister had done, to someone who is essentially a racist bigot. He said those words, and that was marvellous.
Caroline,
and instead of this, the Tories have been trying to get rid of John Bercow for years and years. You can't believe your luck that you might just be able to do it now.
All right, well, let Alec answer that claim.
He's not acted impartially. He's brought his chair into disrepute. And the very issues you mentioned, I don't disagree with you on your comments about Donald Trump. There are real problems. He's a man who openly says, my advantage is I've never been in politics, I'm not a politician. Therefore, at this stage, I think it's more important than ever that countries like Britain, who have a proud record in talking to people around the world, actually bring them along, build bridges, don't build walls, and that's the most important aspect moving forward in international policy, not being isolation.
Isn't he supposed to be a referee? Isn't he supposed to be somebody who oversees and is above the sort of statement that he made yesterday?
I think when it comes to domestic politics, that's absolutely right. I think on occasions like this, when there's such controversy, it's perfectly right for him to speak out for Parliament.
He could have chosen to argue that it's much too early. I mean, Barack Obama didn't get a state visit for 26 months. There's a good history of that, but he didn't choose to argue that. He chose to go on the racism and sexism, which he knew would get headlines. And I think that's unfortunate. I think there was a much more legitimate argument he could have made. He chose not to make.
Isn't it important, though, that he makes a stand? I mean, he feels passionately about it. MPs like Caroline Lucas applauded him for it. Isn't it brave of him to stand up in a way and say things that many MPs feel?
Well, I don't think that's his role. I think his role is to chair independently, and he hasn't represented the views of those of us who don't agree with the policies of Donald Trump, but feel that a way to tackle those is to try and act by persuasion, to be an honest friend, and to actually... I mean, let's take an example. 10 days before the Prime Minister met him, he said that he felt NATO was obsolete. After that meeting with the Prime Minister, he said he had 100% support for NATO because in those rooms discussions took place and the merits were put forward. And there are many issues from a man who says, I've never been in politics, that we have to work with. And it's about mature, responsible politics rather than grandstanding.
Isn't it true to say, Caroline Lucas, you say the Tories have wanted to get rid of John Bercow and you want to put pressure on Theresa May as the Prime Minister to try and embarrass her following her meeting with Donald Trump, and this plays into it?
No, No, I think this is also about Parliament flexing its muscles. You know, what we've seen over the last few days and weeks is a Prime Minister who is refusing Parliament any right to have a say, well, she tried to have any say over the Brexit process. The amendments going through at the moment are just being rolled over. No serious.
So you're using this as a stick to beat the government with?
I think it's right that the Parliament stands up for the rights that it has.
So my greatest concern with those comments is that this is against a democratically elected leader of the United States. There's a democratic process in the House, and when the democratic process doesn't give you the results you want to ignore the democratic process.
Except, of course, Alex Shelbrooke, I mean, previous foreign leaders to address Parliament, we've talked about the Chinese Premier and also the leader in Indonesia, but people who have addressed Parliament have been Nelson Mandela and Aung San Suu Kyi. Does President Trump really merit the same treatment as those people?
Well, of course, they have addressed Westminster Hall, and as I understand it, an invitation has not been requested to address Westminster Hall. Now, John Bercow yesterday was acting on a hypothetical situation.
But that's not the answer to my question. Should he be treated in the same way as the list of people I have just mentioned?
But I don't agree with the premise of the question, because he's been invited on a state visit by Her Majesty the Queen. I understand it. The address to parliamentarians. Well, I mean, the palace work with this. I mean, this is about the office of President of the United States.
This is about the Prime Minister rushing over to the States to try to make a quick fix because she's going to be really without friends after Brexit.
All right.
And it's really shaming to all of us to watch it.
Just finally, though, Alex Shelbrooke, should he consider his position, John Bercow?
Absolutely. He's not acting independently, and he is now. The very fact we are having this conversation today on a political issue brought about by the Speaker shows that he is no longer able to independently chair and have support and respect across the whole of the House of Commons. It's unfortunate, but I think his position is untenable.
Thank you both very much. I'm going to have to end it there.